In the previous video, we talked about the different types of epithelial cells. We talked about the shape classification and the layer classification of them. And we went through examples of the simple squamous, simple cuboidal, simple columnar, pseudostratified columnar, the stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal. Now let's talk about the stratified columnar epithelium. So again, stratified means that there are several layers of cells. Just as with stratified squamous, when you look at the stratified columnar cells, you want to pay attention to the top layer of cells or the most superficial layer of cells for the shape designation. The most superficial cells are going to be the ones that are more elongated, looking more columnar. These are going to be the cells that are more mature. The younger cells, or the ones that are in the deeper layers, are going to have a more cube shape. So these are not going to be the ones that you want to look at for explanation on what type of cells we're dealing with. All right. So look at the superficial cells to give you, or the superficial or more mature cells to give you the name of the cell shape. These types of cells you'll find lining things like the male urethra and some of the ducts of the exocrine glands. And we'll talk about exocrine glands shortly. The next and final type of epithelium is transitional epithelium or uroepithelium. Transitional epithelium, this is also a multi-layered type of cell. The reason why it's called transitional is because these cells have both a cube-shaped and an elongated shape, depending on the position that the tissue is in, depending on the amount of stretch or tension that tissue has. These tissues, or this type of tissue, you'll find more in the urinary bladder, the ureters, and the urethra. These are all part of the urinary system. And when these are filled with fluid, those tissues stretch. Once they stretch, they change the shape and appearance of these cells. Once those structures are empty, they change again. That is again why they're called transitional. So they'll sometimes be cube-shaped, sometimes be elongated. Depend on how much tension and stretch these cells have. So when we look at an image, this top image, you'll see you have multiple layers. You have a free end, so the free surface is not connected to anything. You have the basal layer that the cells are all connected to. So this layer or these layers of epithelium, the the bottom layer is connected to this basement membrane that is signature of epithelium. Also, remember that we said that you don't want to look at these lower or deeper layers of cells to help you determine the shape of the cell. Look at the most superficial layer to give you the shape designation, because these younger cells won't have the maturity yet to show you their true shape. So you want to see the shape in the superficial most layer. Transitional epithelium is what you're being shown at the bottom. And depending on how much stretch these tissues have, when the tissue is most stretched, these cells look more squamous. And when the cells are less stretched or has less tension, they look more cuboidal. And that is why it's called transitional, because depending on the state that it's in, the cells look different. For those of you who are visual learners, you have this graph that can show you all the different types of tissue that we talked about, or epithelial tissue that we talked about, the simples, the stratified, and the pseudostratified transitional, a description of each of those, the function of these cells overall, and examples of the locations. And of course, you'll see these more as we get into those more specific systems of the body. Now let's start talking about glandular epithelium. We already mentioned a couple times that there were certain types of cell shapes that you'll find associated with your glands. So now let's learn a little bit more about the structure of our glands. So glandular epithelium is composed of cells that produce and secrete substances into the ducts or directly into body fluids. So these are going to be the substances produced and secreted are going to be things like your hormones, your sweat, your tears, etc. So any of those products, they'll either be secreted directly into body fluids or they'll be secreted onto a surface through a duct. Let's talk about the differences. So two types of glands, endocrine and exocrine glands. Endo meaning within, exo meaning without or outside. So endocrine glands will secrete substances directly into the tissue fluid, that extracellular fluid, or it'll be secreted directly into the bloodstream. Examples of this are your hormones, things like your thyroid, your ovaries, your testes. They secrete their product, their hormone, directly into the bloodstream or directly into a tissue fluid that will then end up in the bloodstream. Your exocrine glands they don't secrete directly into a fluid or into the blood, which is also a fluid. It secretes to a surface through a duct. So if you think about an air conditioning duct, a duct is basically a big tube that allows a product to go from one place to another, go from its source to some surface. Air conditioning ducts, they take that cool air that's produced by the air conditioner and then bring it into a room, whichever room you want it to go in. Exocrine glands are very similar. They will secrete their product directly to the relevant surface. For example, exocrine glands are things like your tear glands. The tears are produced by the tear glands. The tear duct will then carry that directly to a body surface. In that case, it's the eye. Your sweat glands, same idea. Sweat glands will produce sweat, secrete it directly onto a body surface, your skin surface, through a duct. There are two types of exocrine glands structurally. They're either unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular meaning one cell. So the whole gland is composed of one cell. We've already talked about this type of cell when we talked about goblet cells. Remember, goblet cells are going to be those cells associated with columnar epithelium that produce mucus and secrete it onto a surface, like the surface of your digestive system or the surface of your respiratory system. This mucus is going to line that lumen or that free surface and help to protect it from damage, help to protect it from invaders, etc. Keep it moist, keep the cells moist so that they don't dry out, etc. Multicellular glands are all the other glands that have more than one cell associated with that one particular gland. Now, when you look at multicellular glands, they can look very different. They can be considered simple or compound, and we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. But again, your multicellular glands are like your sweat glands and salivary glands, mammary glands that produce milk, etc. So let's talk about the features of those exocrine glands. So structural types of exocrine glands, you might have simple or compound. Simple meaning that the duct, remember exocrine glands secrete its product through a duct to a surface. That duct, if it does not branch, then it's considered simple. If the duct itself branches before it reaches that secretory portion, then it's called compound, right? So simple or compound, does it branch or not? If it branches before it reaches the secretory portion, it's considered compound. If it does not branch, it's considered simple. It can be tubular or alveolar. Tubular means that it consists of epithelial-lined tubes that are lined by epithelial tissues, or it can be alveolar. It can be have sac-like, um, the ends of the glands can look like little sacs, little sac dilations, all right? So tubular, meaning that they look more like tubes, or alveolar, meaning that they look less like tubes and more like a sac on the end. And we'll see an image of these in just a moment. Types of glandular secretions. So the different secretions produced by your exocrine glands are these. You have merocrine glands, apocrine glands, and holocrine glands. Merocrine glands secrete fluid by exocytosis. So this is the type of secretion that your salivary gland and your sweat glands produce. Your pancreas also secretes its exocrine gland product in this way. So exocytosis. All right, so this is basically where, let's see, is there a picture? Yes, all right. So exocytosis, you see how this cell here has these little dots on the inside of it. These are the product that this cell is secreting. Exocytosis basically means that these little products are going to be enveloped in a little vacuole, and then that vacuole is going to be pushed toward the edge of the cell and then emptied out into this empty space. So it's just this product that goes into the empty space, and then that goes into the duct, and that can open up into a free surface where this product is then secreted onto the free surface. So exocytosis, product is in the cell, and then that product is pushed toward the edge, toward the edge, toward the edge in a vacuole until it opens up and just spits out that product into that gland. So that is a merocrine gland. An apocrine gland. In apocrine glands, the gland will lose a small part of the cell during secretion. So that means that some of the cell itself is being excreted as that product is being excreted. With merocrine glands, it was only that product that was excreted to the open surface, into the gland, into the duct of the gland. Whereas in apocrine glands, part of the cell is lost during the secretion as well. You'll find this in your mammary glands. So when uh, the mom or when the mom is producing milk, that baby is drinking milk product, that some of that secretion is part of the cell itself that is secreting it. Ceruminous glands. Cerumen is earwax. So your earwax is is partially made up of the cells that make up the glands that are secreting that that product. So if we go back to this image, here in this particular gland, you see that these little dots are the product that the gland is being, that the gland is producing, or the cell is producing, I should say. When it's ready to secrete its product, part of the cell itself is going to be lost from the cell and excreted along with the product. Miracrine, it's just a product. With the apocrine, it's part of the cell itself. And then with your holocrine glands, the whole cell filled with the product is being released, like your sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands, sebum is the oil that is produced and released on your skin. So your sebum is made up of those holocrine cells. So again, this cell produces its product, and then this entire cell is going to be released, or the cell is going to divide, and then an entire cell is going to be released into the duct. And then as it has been released, that cell starts to disintegrate while the product is being pushed through the duct. All right, so Miracrine, it's just the product. Apocrine, it's part of the cell. Holocrine, it is the whole cell being released. All right, so now you know the different types of glandular secretions along with the different structural types of the exocrine glands. Now let's look at the structural types of exocrine glands again. So we talked about the simple cells. So the simple, let's go back. Simple means that the duct itself does not branch. So this portion is the duct. Remember, the duct is going to be that portion that goes directly to the surface. So this duct is not branching. This is simple. This duct doesn't branch. This is simple. This duct doesn't branch, and neither does this one. All of these are simple examples of simple, right? Here, this duct has branched. This has 3 branches here. This has 3 branches here. This is compound. So let's go back. Compound is when the duct branches before it reaches the secretory portion. So this is the surface. This is the duct. This is the secretory portion. When the duct does not branch, it's called simple. When the duct does branch, it's called compound. Now, the secretory portion, depending on what it looks like, will have a different name. So tubular. Tubular means that it is epithelial lined tubes. So this is tubular because it is, well, shaped like a tube. This is branched tubular because these secretory portions here, there are multiple different ones shaped like a tube or shaped like several tubes. So this is your simple branched tubular. This is tubular, but this is a coiled tube. All right, so simple, coiled, tubular. And this is alveolar, because remember it said that the alveolar, let's go back, alveolar, the terminal portions form sac-like dilations. Sac-like, this it looks like a little sacs, right? So these are simple branched alveolar glands. This is compound because you have more than one duct branch. Compound alveolar because these are dilated ends. This is compound tubular because the tube, you have tubes instead of dilations. All right. So make sure you look over those. If you have questions, bring the questions to class. We will begin the next lecture talking about connective tissue.